Good morning, guys, and welcome to the first video of Unit 9. We're going to be talking about our oral flora and plaque, or biofilms, in this unit. Um, so let's get moving along. Now, all semester we've been talking about bacteria, how to culture bacteria, why they grow, where they grow, so on and so forth. We haven't really talked about why bacteria are so behave or grow so well in our mouth. And if we look at our mouth, it's a perfect incubator for bacteria to grow and to culture. You can see here there's 4 reasons listed why it's good. The mouth is a good reason or a good place for bacteria to grow. First, we have saliva. So there's a constant supply of nutrients that come into our mouth. I mean, that's where we eat, so we're constantly putting food in our mouth. That gives us the bacteria the carbohydrates, the proteins, the fats, the lipids that they need to grow. It's also at a controlled temperature. Our mouth ranges in temperature from 35 to 38 degrees Celsius. It's got oxygen as we breathe in every 20 times a minute on average. The pH is held pretty constant between 6.8 and 7.2. So the bacteria have a very controlled environment to live and to grow. Not only that, but if we think about the environment in our mouth, we have a lot of different substances and substrates that are in our mouth. We have soft tissue like our tongue, like our gingiva, our gums. We have hard surfaces like our hard palate, for the enamel on our teeth, between our teeth. So there's lots of places for bacteria to adhere, to stick, and for them to grow quite happily. So our mouth is basically a perfect incubator for bacterial growth. Now, some of the factors that will influence this type of bacterial growth are characteristic of our mouth, where the bacteria grow in our mouth, and some of these components like that. So first we have competing resident microflora. There are thousands and thousands of species that grow in our mouth. Generally grow quite happily, and they're going to be our normal flora, so they don't generally cause us any problems. So they grow there, and like we've talked about before, they take up the real estate. They have covered the most of the surface areas, and they live happily. They don't cause us any problems. So if we've got a healthy mouth microflora, we have less chance of dangerous, more pathogenic bacteria of moving in. When we look at our teeth, if our teeth are smooth, for example, so you have good dental hygiene, then it's more difficult for bacteria to stick, which can help them. Of course, they can't grow unless they can stick to there. So if you've got teeth that are chipped or rough, or they have pits and fissures, it's going to make it easier for bacteria to colonize and grow. You're also going to need to think about places that bacteria can get into and grow. We're talking about the sulcular epithelium. So the sulcus is this area right here, which is an empty space between the tooth, the enamel of the tooth, and the gingiva, the free gingiva that make up our gums. So this area right here is a free space, and for bacteria, that's an incredible place to grow, because you can get down in here. There's going to be nutrients, it's going to be warm, and you're protected. So the crevicular or the sulcular epithelium, the gingival crevices, and then of course the fluids that are in our mouth. These are all things that are going to help promote bacterial growth, and it's going to affect where and how many or what patterns of growth we see in our mouth. These things can also vary between people. So some people's mouths may be better for bacteria to grow, and other people's mouth will be less advantageous if your bacteria to grow there. Now, plaque. What is plaque? We all have to go to the dentist at times to get a cleaning, and the reasons we go are to maintain good hygiene. But first and foremost, a lot of us need to get rid of plaque that builds up. Now, plaque is a really good example of a natural biofilm. It is soft, sticky film. It has millions of different bacteria, and it grows on most of our mouth surfaces, but certainly on our teeth. The common example of plaque is that whitish or yellowish material found at the bottom of the teeth, the base of the teeth where the teeth meet the gums, between the teeth. So you can see this area right here is very common to find plaque buildup. In the area where the tooth meets the gingiva or the gum. This is a shot, of course, looking at I think with the bottom incisors, and you see it's quite easy for plaque to build up in behind teeth where it's a little bit harder for us to brush. It usually results of bad oral hygiene, and maybe not brushing your teeth enough, or maybe not flossing, or not going to the dentist when you should every 6 months, or maybe even closer than that. Plaque is a type of condition, or it's a situation that can lead to much bigger issues. One of the things that it can lead to is periodontal disease, and we'll talk about that in another video. And it can also lead to caries, and we'll get back to that a little while later. Now, plaque is a living thing. It's a biofilm, so it's a thin layer. So that's generally what a film means, and bio, of course, means living. So it's a living layer that's going to live on top of our teeth. It has a large bacteria population. A very large number of bacteria grow in plaque. If you think about the first unit, we talked about Anton van Leeuwenhoek, and he invented the microscope. Well, one of the first places that he found animalcules, remember those little tiny animals that he thought they were animals, were in plaque on his teeth. So it's a very bio-rich area. So biofilm refers to a group of microorganisms. It's typically bacteria, but it could be other things. And they stick together on a surface, which is exactly what plaque is. It's a group of living microorganisms that live on the surface of our teeth. And if you can see down here in the pictures, this is our tooth surface right here, and then this is the bacteria, and they grow. And as plaque develops, biofilm develops, it gets much more complicated. It almost turns into, well, it turns into its own little community. And that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this unit, really. All right, so as a biofilm progresses, we can see in the top picture here the development of the biofilm. So here's going to be our plaque growing right here, the yellow, and then we get our gingiva here, which is darker pink, and then we get the other tissue below it, the rest of the gums, which are a lighter pink. You can see the depth. Well, our tooth is right here, of course. And this is the free gingiva. The sulcus is this space right here that I was talking about earlier. You can see as we get down deeper, we have different characteristics of bacteria. So the ones that need air are usually closer to the top, the aerobic bacteria. We get a transitional area between the aerobic and then the primarily anaerobic bacteria that are deeper down into the sulcus. So the words up here, karyogenic, so these are bacteria up here, the primary aerobic bacteria. They're going to produce acid, and they're going to cause some damage to the enamel, and they're going to be karyogenic, which means to cause cavities. If we get down here, we get into these bacteria that are periogenic. Now these are bacteria, once they get deeper into the sulcus, they have access to other tissues, and they can cause periodontal disease or gingivitis, and we'll come back to those definitions a little while later. Okay, so we start off with our plaque, our dental plaque, which is, we said, a biofilm, and you can see the plaque on this picture. It's not a great picture, sorry about that, but you can see the plaque build up at the intersection between the teeth and the gums, right here. Now, if plaque is allowed to sit long enough, so if you don't go to the dentist, you don't brush your teeth well enough, what can happen is those bacteria that are living in the biofilm, they can start to lay down deposits of calcium and phosphates that they get from our saliva. And what that does is it'll start to harden the plaque. And the plaque becomes what we call a calculus. So the calculus is very dense, it's very thick, and it sticks to our teeth. Now, plaque is something you can brush off with your toothbrush. Once we move into a calculus, or tartar sometimes it's called, then we need to go see a dentist to have it removed. So plaque biofilms have a cellular and a non-cellular component to them. Now, I don't want you to think this is the same thing, but think about when we studied connective tissue in biology course. We talked about a connective tissue had a living component, the cells, and then we had a non-living component, which was the matrix. And it's the same idea here, but this isn't the tissue, so please don't make that mistake. We have our cellular component here. So that's going to consist of around 70% of this is going to be bacteria. You'll also have some other things that grow in there, some viruses and stuff like that. And those are going to be our cellular component. On top of that, we're going to have our non-cellular component, and that's going to be, again, referred to as the organic matrix. Those are going to be these extracellular product that these bacteria produce to help them live there. It's going to take molecules from our saliva, it's going to have waste products from their metabolism, and it's going to form a non-living structure that the bacteria grow in and around. So if you want to liken it to the cartilage that we studied in Biology 1200, then you'll talk about the living cells, which are the chondrocytes that live inside the matrix, which is that non-living tissue that surrounds it, that gives it its structure and its density. And it's the same thing, not the exact same thing, of course, but it's a similar thing here. So if we look at the composition of plaque, like I said, we get the living and the non-living stuff, mainly microorganisms and this intermicrobial matrix, which is the non-living part. Now, if we're talking about bacteria, 70 to 80% of total plaque volume is bacteria. So that's a large amount. If we take a gram of plaque, we're looking at 10 to the 11 bacteria. So that's 10 with 11 zeros on it. That's how many bacteria would be in 1 gram of plaque. So it's a very, very dense area for bacterial growth. All right, so plaque will form on any basic surface in our mouth. It's much more difficult for it to form on the soft tissues as it is to our hard tissues. So we can find plaque growing on the teeth, and we can also find it growing on the soft gum tissue around the teeth. And if you look at the picture here, on the bottom here, you can see how the gums, the soft tissue around the teeth have become red and inflamed, and that's because of the presence of plaque and the bacteria associated with it. So the major sites of plaque formation are going to be the enamel of our molar teeth, so our teeth in the back of our mouth. Those are harder for us to clean, harder for us to brush and reach. So that's going to be an area where it would be easier for bacteria to grow. The margin of the gum and the tooth, and that's what we've been talking about a lot in these examples. So the area right here where the tooth and the gum meet, and then the margin between the teeth. So this is the area where we can't get with a toothbrush. We generally have to make sure we get it when we floss. So if you're living in a plaque and a biofilm, then what do you get out of that if you're a bacteria? Well, you get a supply of nutrients. You get the organic matrix, which is going to be made up of carbohydrates and protein. And if you're bacteria living in that matrix, then you have access to all this stuff. And these are all things you're going to need for metabolism and for everyday growth and and healthy chemical reactions. Another thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a binding substance. Okay, you're going to have something to stick to, which makes it a lot easier if you're a bacteria to stay. So you can stay put, you've got a substrate to grow on, and you can live happily there in that area where the extracellular matrix or the matrix develops. Now, plaque biofilms are also going to provide protection against the host defenses, okay? So our immune system, the stuff that happens in our mouth that will help protect us against biofilm and bacterial infections. These are all things that are going to, the biofilm is going to protect the bacteria from that. So the fluoride that comes in our toothpaste and our water that we drink, the chlorhexidine or Listerine that you gargle, none of this stuff is going to be able to touch the bacteria because it's protected by that matrix.